So would you say the beef has been squashed? All is good?
No, man. Conor.
Oh, okay. I thought that was a nice message. No. No, okay, fair enough, fair enough.
All right, so here's what went down. Conor McGregor actually congratulated Dustin Poirier when his son was born. But according to what we're hearing now, this whole situation has reached another level entirely. The trash talking. 3 fights, broken promises, and some serious accusations.
Conor, you called Dustin a hillbilly. Dustin and I are from the same hometown. Does that make me a hillbilly? Conor, listen, before you answer this, you remember how much bigger I am than you.
You're the ghetto hillbilly, I call you.
This whole thing between Conor McGregor and Dustin Poirier started with words way before they ever threw hands. September 27th, 2014, at UFC 78, McGregor wasn't just promoting their fight. He went after who Poirier was as a person. Called him emotional and mentally weak, said he'd break Poirier's mind before he even touched him physically. Basically painted this picture of a guy who didn't have what it takes internally to compete with the best.
And by the way, I did see Conor wishing you congratulations when you posted about your son. So would you say the beef has been squashed? All is good?
No, man. Conor.
Oh, okay. I thought that was a nice message.
This wasn't your typical fight promotion stuff. McGregor was targeting Poirier's core identity as a human being. He made it sound like Poirier was fundamentally broken in ways that went way beyond just fighting skills. Created this narrative that Poirier would fall apart under pressure because something was wrong with him on the inside. The whole approach was designed to destroy, not just defeat. And then McGregor went and backed up everything he said. First round knockout in under 2 minutes. That left hand connected perfectly, and Poirier went down hard. After winning, McGregor kept going. Called Poirier fragile and acted like the knockout proved every psychological assessment he'd made during the build-up. Stood over his opponent and doubled down on every nasty thing he'd said.
I was in juvenile detention, and me and her might have not even been dating at the time. She was writing me letters every week. One of the only, besides my mother, only letters I would get was her. And when I got out of juvenile detention, she was there. She drove all the way out, to watch me leave and stuff like that. And I was like, I'm gonna marry this girl.
Aww.
That loss forced Poirier to completely rebuild who he was as a fighter. He switched weight classes, abandoned his wild, movement-heavy style, turned himself into this calculated, disciplined, dangerous competitor. But those words McGregor said never left him. Being dismissed like that, being called mentally weak, that became fuel that burned for years.
And have a goal. And when I found fighting, I wanted to be the best at that. So everything else didn't matter to me.
Yeah.
Whatever that outlet is, even like I was talking with a guy, I just did a conference where I spoke in Mexico a couple of days ago. He has a nonprofit where he builds skate parks in cities, and he's built some in New Orleans.
6 years went by before they fought again. During that stretch, McGregor became the biggest star combat sports had ever produced. Won the featherweight title by starching Jose Aldo in 13 seconds. Moved up and grabbed the lightweight belt too, made UFC history, holding 2 championships at once. Crossed over into boxing and fought Floyd Mayweather in this massive spectacle that made hundreds of millions. Changed how the UFC operated as a business. His face was everywhere. His voice took over every press conference. Poirier went a completely different route. Kept fighting the elite competition consistently. Made the move to lightweight and started stacking wins against the division's best. Captured the interim lightweight championship. Earned respect, not through spectacle, but through toughness and discipline. The same guy McGregor wrote off as emotionally fragile proved he was one of the most resilient fighters in the entire sport. UFC booked the rematch for January 23rd, 2021 at UFC 257. The build-up shocked everyone who remembered their first fight. McGregor showed respect, praised Poirier, talked about growth and maturity, acknowledged how Poirier had evolved both as a fighter and as a person. All that trash talk from their first encounter was nowhere to be found. McGregor took it even further, pledged $500,000 to Poirier's charity, the Good Fight Foundation. This was Poirier's organization focused on helping underserved communities. The foundation showed his commitment to using his platform for positive change beyond fighting. McGregor's public pledge made headlines everywhere. Looked like this rivalry had evolved from personal hatred into mutual respect between two veterans. Then the cage door closed. Poirier picked McGregor apart with this tactical game plan built around calf kicks that hammered McGregor's lead leg with punishing accuracy. McGregor's movement started breaking down as round 1 went on. He had no answer for what Poirier was doing to him. Round 2, Poirier finished it with a combination that put McGregor on the canvas. McGregor's first knockout loss in MMA. That aura of being untouchable that had surrounded McGregor for almost a decade just shattered. Weeks later, Poirier dropped a bombshell that destroyed whatever good feelings remained. He went public saying McGregor never delivered on that promised $500,000 donation. The money never showed up. Poirier's foundation never got anything. That pledge that symbolized their evolved relationship never turned into actual support. McGregor came back with fury, claimed the donation was being reviewed, said he wanted to know exactly how the money would be used before releasing it, accused Poirier of handling the situation wrong by going public instead of keeping it private, said trust was broken between them because of how Poirier approached it. The whole argument played out on Twitter in real time. McGregor posted aggressive messages. Poirier fired back with his own statements. Everyone watched two fighters who had shown respect weeks earlier now attacking each other's character and integrity. The charity dispute became the main topic across sports media. That respect they displayed before UFC 2057 was revealed as fragile at best, fake at worst. UFC booked the trilogy for July 10, 2021 at UFC 2064. McGregor went after Poirier's charity, questioned whether the Good Fight Foundation was even legitimate, grabbed bottles of Poirier's hot sauce brand and dumped them on stage, screamed threats that required security to physically step in and separate them. This wasn't McGregor selling a fight anymore. This was McGregor lashing out with rage that seemed to surprise even people who'd watched his promotional tactics for years. The charm that made him a global star disappeared. What replaced it looked like genuine hostility that wasn't connected to any strategic purpose. Fight night arrived. End of round 1. McGregor threw a punch while stepping backward. His ankle snapped. He went down with a catastrophic leg injury. The bone broke so loud you could hear it. Poirier won by TKO. What happened next defined their feud forever. As doctors surrounded McGregor on the canvas, as his leg bent at this unnatural angle, as he faced the reality that his night had ended in the worst possible way, he unleashed this verbal assault that stunned everyone there. He screamed at Poirier with rage that seemed amplified by his physical pain, shouted explicit threats, made comments about Poirier's wife that shocked viewers worldwide. The broadcast caught McGregor pointing at Poirier and unleashing words that were partially censored but clearly understood. Even by MMA trash talk standards, this tirade was condemned by fighters, media, and fans across the sport. Poirier later said this moment ended any chance of reconciliation. The line McGregor crossed couldn't be uncrossed. 3 fights, 2 knockouts by Poirier, 1 broken leg, a donation that never arrived, accusations from the canvas that targeted family. This is how their rivalry escalated from competition to hatred. The years of online warfare and deleted attacks. That broken leg kept McGregor out of the octagon, but it didn't silence him on social media. What followed was this prolonged campaign of digital hostility that stretched across years without any fighting to justify it. McGregor had lost twice to Poirier and suffered a devastating injury in their final encounter. Yet he kept launching attacks as if the rivalry required constant feeding. From 2022 through 2024, McGregor targeted Poirier with this relentless stream of inflammatory posts that revealed how obsessed he was with their unfinished business. He mocked Poirier's injuries whenever they happened during competition. When Poirier had setbacks in fights against other opponents, McGregor appeared online to celebrate his misfortune with comments that ranged from dismissive to cruel. He couldn't seem to let a moment pass where Poirier experienced difficulty without making sure to add his voice to the criticism. The attacks went beyond fighting matters into territory that had nothing to do with competition. McGregor questioned Poirier's legacy and accomplishments despite losing to him twice in decisive fashion, posted inflammatory comments about Poirier's career trajectory as if his own record against Poirier somehow didn't exist, created narratives that contradicted the actual results of their encounters trying to rewrite history through sheer repetition of alternative claims. A clear pattern emerged during this period that revealed something troubling about McGregor's approach to the ongoing feud. He'd post aggressive content targeting Poirier during moments when attention might be focused elsewhere in the sports world. The post would generate immediate backlash from fans and media observers, who found the continued hostility excessive given their competitive history. McGregor would then delete the post, apparently hoping to avoid long-term damage while still inflicting short-term wounds on his target. One particularly notable incident involved a deleted tweet that mocked a staph infection Poirier suffered. The post drew widespread criticism for targeting a serious medical condition that had nothing to do with fighting ability or competitive results. McGregor removed it after the backlash intensified, but screenshots had already circulated across social media platforms. The willingness to attack someone for a health issue revealed something about his mindset that even longtime supporters found difficult to defend or rationalize. The attack, backlash, deletion cycle repeated throughout these years with numbing regularity. McGregor would fire shots and then erase the evidence, but the internet preserved what he wanted to disappear. Each incident added another layer to the accumulated grievances between them while demonstrating that McGregor couldn't or wouldn't move past the rivalry. Even as years separated him from their last actual fight, Poirier responded to this sustained campaign with something McGregor perhaps didn't expect: silence. He declined to engage with the provocations that arrived regularly across his social media feeds, didn't fire back with his own attacks, or attempt to publicly end the rivalry, not in the sense of reconciliation, but in the sense of finality. He'd moved on with his life and wasn't interested in continuing a war of words with someone who couldn't accept the results of their actual competition inside the octagon. This approach likely frustrated McGregor more than any response could have achieved. The deleted posts suggested he wanted reactions. He wanted engagement. He wanted Poirier to descend to his level and participate in the ongoing hostility that seemed to sustain him. Poirier's refusal to play that game left McGregor swinging at shadows, generating controversy without achieving the validation of a response from his intended target. Meanwhile, McGregor's attempts to return to the UFC faced repeated delays and complications that kept him out of the octagon. Reports suggested potential comeback fights against various opponents, with Michael Chandler emerging as the most likely candidate for his eventual return to competition. The prospect of McGregor versus Poirier existed as a theoretical possibility that made logical sporting sense on paper. Their trilogy had ended on a technicality. A fourth fight would provide the decisive conclusion fans claimed to want. But Poirier made his position on that possibility abundantly clear through repeated statements to media outlets. He expressed no interest in fighting McGregor again under any circumstances. The financial incentive existed and would likely be substantial. The competitive argument existed given their inconclusive trilogy. The promotional value existed given the history and animosity between them. None of it mattered to Poirier. He didn't want that energy in his life. Didn't need to prove anything else against someone he'd already knocked out twice. The record showed what needed to be shown. The landscape of their rivalry shifted unexpectedly in late 2025, when news emerged that had nothing to do with fighting or competition. Dustin Poirier and his wife Jolie welcomed a baby boy into their family, marking a personal milestone that transcended the world of professional combat sports entirely. Poirier announced the news on social media with the joy appropriate to such a moment, sharing his happiness with the fans who'd followed his journey for over a decade of professional fighting. The announcement represented something significant about Poirier's life, beyond the octagon, and the rivalries that defined his career. His relationship with Jolie had endured since middle school, surviving everything that life and professional fighting could throw at them. She'd stood beside him through juvenile detention as a young person, through early struggles when he didn't own a car and could barely afford to pursue his dreams, through years of fighting in small venues before the UFC came calling with opportunities that would change their lives forever. Their bond represented stability in a sport often characterized by broken relationships and personal chaos. While other fighters cycled through relationships and public controversies, Poirier maintained a home life that grounded him throughout the most intense periods of his career. Jolie wasn't just his wife, but his foundation. The person he credited with keeping him sane through wars inside the cage and pressures outside it. McGregor saw the announcement about the baby boy on social media. What happened next surprised observers who'd grown accustomed to the hostile nature of their interactions over the years. He commented on Poirier's post with two simple words, "Congrats, bro." The message appeared sincere on its surface when examined without the context of their history. Contained no sarcasm that readers could detect in the text itself. Included no hidden barbs or callbacks to their contentious past. Was a straightforward congratulatory note on a life event that typically exists outside the boundaries of professional rivalries, regardless of how intense those rivalries might have become. Births represent moments when even bitter enemies sometimes set aside their differences to acknowledge shared humanity and the joy of new life. Some observers interpreted the comment as an olive branch extended across years of hostility and pain. Here was McGregor, removed from their last fight by more than 4 years, acknowledging something positive in Poirier's life, without attaching conditions or qualifications to his message. Maybe the passage of time had softened the edges of his animosity. Maybe he recognized that certain moments called for decency rather than continued warfare. Maybe he was signaling readiness to move past what had transpired between them and begin some form of healing. The interpretation seemed reasonable, given how sports rivalries often conclude when viewed from historical perspective. Former enemies become friends at retirement ceremonies held years after their competitive days ended. The heat of competition fades as careers wind down and perspective develops with distance from the events that caused such pain. Athletes who once despised each other find common ground and shared experiences that only they truly understand, having walked similar paths through the unique pressures of professional sports. McGregor's message could have represented the beginning of that familiar transition toward eventual mutual respect that characterizes so many rivalries when enough time has passed. Media coverage treated the comment as potentially significant in the context of their long-running feud. Articles appeared questioning whether the bitter rivalry might finally be approaching some form of resolution after years of hostility. Social media discussions debated the sincerity of McGregor's gesture and what it might mean for their relationship going forward, if anything. The two words generated more analysis and speculation than many actual fight announcements in the UFC. Then Poirier responded publicly. When interviewer Ariel Helwani asked Poirier about McGregor's congratulatory message during a conversation, Poirier didn't pause to consider diplomatic options that might preserve future possibilities. Didn't craft careful language that might leave doors open for reconciliation down the road. Didn't acknowledge the gesture as meaningful, even if insufficient to repair what had been broken between them over years of conflict. The response eliminated any ambiguity about where Poirier stood on the matter of their rivalry and its potential resolution. The congratulations meant nothing to him, didn't represent progress toward reconciliation, didn't indicate that time had healed any of the wounds McGregor had inflicted over the years, was irrelevant noise from someone whose words Poirier had stopped valuing long ago. The bluntness of the response generated significant reaction across MMA media and fan communities worldwide. Some expressed surprise that Poirier would reject what appeared to be a genuine gesture so completely and publicly. Others argued he was entirely justified, given the accumulated history between them and the specific things McGregor had said and done. The debate itself illustrated how deeply the feud had penetrated public consciousness, generating strong opinions even about a two-word comment and its emphatic rejection. Understanding why Poirier responded so definitively to McGregor's congratulations requires examining what McGregor actually did during their rivalry, and why certain actions carry weight that time cannot diminish, regardless of how many years pass. This wasn't a case of competitive trash talk that both sides engaged in equally as part of fight promotion. This was a pattern of behavior that crossed boundaries most fighters recognize as inviolable, even in a sport built on physical violence. The comments McGregor made from the canvas at UFC 264 targeted Jolie Poirier specifically and explicitly. Didn't simply insult Dustin in the heat of defeat when the pain of his broken leg might have explained, if not excused, lashing out. He directed explicit comments toward the woman who'd been with Dustin since childhood, who'd written him letters during juvenile detention when almost no one else believed in him, who'd driven him to his first fights when he couldn't afford a car, who'd believed in him when he struggled to believe in himself through the darkest periods of his life. Poirier has spoken extensively about what his wife means to him and how her presence shaped his entire career and his life beyond fighting. In recent interviews, he's reflected on the foundation she provided during years when success was far from guaranteed and the path forward was anything but clear. This is the relationship McGregor attacked on international television, while lying on the canvas with a broken leg in front of millions of viewers. This is the person he chose to target when he could have simply accepted defeat with whatever dignity remained available to him in that moment. The decision to direct hostility toward Jolie rather than keeping the conflict between himself and Dustin represented a choice that revealed something about McGregor's character in that moment of vulnerability and pain. The charity dispute added another substantial dimension to the grievances that accumulated between them over the years. McGregor made a public pledge of $500,000 to the Good Fight Foundation before their rematch at UFC. The pledge generated positive media coverage and contributed to the narrative of mutual respect that surrounded that fight during its promotional period. When the money failed to materialize after McGregor's defeat, Poirier faced a choice about whether to address it publicly or let it pass quietly and absorb the loss. He chose to speak publicly because the pledge had been made publicly in front of cameras and media. McGregor didn't quietly offer private support that he then failed to deliver behind closed doors. He made a commitment in front of the world that was reported globally and generated substantial positive press coverage for him. When that commitment went unfulfilled, Poirier felt obligated to clarify the situation for the sake of his foundation, its mission, and the people it served, who deserved honesty about what support would actually arrive. The years of deleted attacks on social media demonstrated that McGregor couldn't let the rivalry rest, even when he wasn't competing, and had no fight scheduled. The pattern of posting inflammatory content and then removing it after backlash suggested someone who wanted to inflict damage without facing full accountability for doing so in the long term. Each deleted tweet represented another entry in a ledger of grievances that Poirier maintained, even while refusing to engage publicly with the provocations. Dustin Poirier has entered the final chapter of his fighting career with remarkable clarity about what he wants from his remaining time in the sport that saved his life. The logical sporting argument for a fourth fight exists in theory and would likely generate massive pay-per-view interest. Their trilogy ended without a decisive conclusion that satisfied the competitive question. A broken bone determined the outcome of their last fight rather than the skills of either fighter demonstrating clear superiority. But Poirier has made his position on that possibility clear through repeated statements to anyone who asks. He doesn't want that energy present in his final moments as a professional fighter, doesn't want the circus that would accompany such a fight to define how he exits the sport that gave him everything. He's earned the right to choose how his story ends, and McGregor isn't part of the ending he envisions. The rivalry has taken on meaning beyond the competitive question of who would win a fourth fight, if it ever happened. It represents a case study in how feuds can spiral beyond sport into territory that damages the possibility of future reconciliation permanently, demonstrates that not all rivalries end with eventual mutual respect when the competitive fires dim. Some end with one person wanting nothing to do with the other, permanently and without exception. Fighting itself meant something transformative to Poirier that extends far beyond competition and rivalry, and records and championships. It provided direction when he had none and was heading toward outcomes that could have destroyed his life, gave him purpose when he was making choices that led to consequences he would have struggled to escape without the intervention of the sport. The sport that saved Poirier from a difficult path also brought McGregor into his life through the random intersections that competitive brackets create. Connection produced 3 fights across 7 years, 2 decisive victories for Poirier that reshaped how both men were perceived, and a feud that will likely never resolve in any way that satisfies observers hoping for reconciliation and closure. There will be no handshake at a future Hall of Fame ceremony where both men are honored for their contributions to the sport. There will be no moment where both acknowledge what their rivalry meant to MMA and to the fans who followed it through all its phases. There will be no redemption arc where enemies become friends and share stories about the old days when they wanted to destroy each other. What remains is the historical record that cannot be changed regardless of what either man does going forward. McGregor called Poirier mentally weak in 2014 and was proven wrong emphatically. Poirier knocked him out twice in fights that left no room for debate about who was superior when they competed. McGregor promised $500,000 to charity. and didn't deliver on that public commitment. McGregor attacked Poirier's wife from the canvas after suffering a broken leg in front of millions of viewers. McGregor spent years posting and deleting attacks on social media that were preserved in screenshots even when he wanted them gone. McGregor sent a two-word congratulation that Poirier rejected completely and publicly without hesitation. The feud stands as a reminder that some wounds don't heal because the person who suffered them chooses not to let them heal. Forgiveness isn't obligatory. Reconciliation isn't mandatory. Moving on doesn't require accepting gestures from people who caused pain. Poirier has decided that McGregor exists on the other side of a line that cannot be crossed in the other direction regardless of time or circumstance. No gesture changes that decision, no words repair what was broken. This is one of those situations where this is how it ends. Not with resolution, but with a refusal to pretend that resolution is possible or desirable.